The rain was a cold, relentless hammer, pounding the streets of New York City into submission. Jamie Carter, soaked to the bone, sprinted through the alley, his sneakers slapping puddles as his heart raced faster than his feet. He wasn't running from the storm, was running from himself. At 25, Jamie had nothing but a tattered notebook and a head full of stories no one wanted to read. He'd come to the city chasing dreams of being a writer. But the only thing he'd found was a string of rejections and a one-room apartment he could barely afford. Tonight, he'd been evicted. His landlord's final words, "You're out." Dreamer still stung worse than the rain. With nowhere to go, Jamie had wandered, clutching his notebook like a lifeline, until the storm drove him to seek shelter in the first open door he found. That door belonged to Horizon Enterprises, a sleek glass tower that loomed over the alley like a silent giant. Jamie slipped inside, expecting a security guard to toss him back into the rain. Instead, the lobby was eerily empty, all polished marble and dim lights. His sneakers squeaked as he ventured deeper, drawn to a faint glow from an office on the top floor. He didn't know why he climbed the stairs, maybe desperation, maybe instinct, but when he pushed open the heavy oak door, he froze. Ethan Caldwell, the CEO of Horizon Enterprises, sat at a mahogany desk, his sharp features illuminated by a single lamp. At 35, Ethan was a mystery wrapped in a tailored suit, his dark eyes scanning Jamie with an intensity that made the air feel heavier than the storm outside. "You're trespassing," Ethan said, his voice low, almost amused. "But you look like you have a story to tell." Jamie's throat tightened. "Tu didn't mean to, I was just trying to get out of the rain." Ethan leaned back, his gaze never leaving Jamie. "Everyone's running from something. What's your story, kid?" The question hit Jamie like a punch. He clutched his notebook tighter, its pages filled with half-finished tales of love and loss. Stories he'd poured his soul into but never dared share. "I'm a writer," he said, the words sounding small in the vast office. "Or, I'm trying to be." Ethan's lips twitched. Not quite a smile. "Trying's not enough. Show me." He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. "Write something. Now." Jamie hesitated, his hands trembling as he sat. This was insane. He was a nobody, dripping wet in a CEO's office, being asked to write on command. But something in Ethan's eyes, something raw, almost hungry, made Jamie open his notebook. His pen scratched the page, and words spilled out, a story about a boy who loved too fiercely, a boy who hid his heart because the world wasn't ready for it. As Jamie wrote, Ethan watched, his silence heavy but not unkind. Hours passed, the storm raging outside. But inside, it was just them, Jamie's words and Ethan's unwavering gaze. When Jamie finally stopped, his hand cramping, Ethan leaned forward. "That's something," he said softly. "You can stay here tonight. Keep writing." Jamie blinked, stunned. "Stay? Here? Why?" Ethan stood, his shadow falling over Jamie. "Because I see something in you. And because I have my own reasons." He turned away, his voice dropping. "Don't ask too many questions. Just write." That night, Jamie slept on a leather couch in a corner of the office, the city's skyline glittering through the rain-streaked windows. He didn't know why Ethan, a man who could buy half the city, was letting a stranger stay. But as he drifted off, notebook still in hand, he felt something he hadn't in years: hope. The next morning, Ethan was gone, but a note sat on the desk: "Keep writing. I'll be back." Jamie's heart raced. This was no ordinary offer, it was a challenge, a lifeline, and maybe something more. He didn't know Ethan's story, but he sensed it was tangled in secrets as deep as his own. Jamie had spent his life hiding who he was, a gay kid from a small town, rejected by his family, invisible in a city that didn't care. Writing was his only way out, his only way to be seen. He opened his notebook again, the words flowing faster now. He wrote about love, about pain, about two souls colliding in a world that tried to keep them apart. Each sentence felt like a confession, a piece of himself he'd never dared share. By evening, Ethan returned, his coat dusted with rain. He read Jamie's pages in silence, his expression unreadable. "You're good," Ethan said finally, his voice softer than before. "Better than good. But you're holding back. Why?" Jamie's chest tightened. "I don't know what you mean." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You do. You're scared to write the truth. About who you are. About what you want." The words cut deep. Jamie had spent years burying his truth, afraid of what it meant to love openly, to write openly. He'd grown up in a town where being gay was a sin, where his first love, a quiet boy named Sam, had left him with a broken heart and a promise to never trust again. But here, in this strange office, under Ethan's piercing gaze, Jamie felt exposed. "I'm not ready," Jamie whispered. Ethan stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "You'll have to be. This world doesn't wait for ready." Over the next few days, Jamie wrote. He wrote through exhaustion, through doubt, through the strange pull he felt toward Ethan, a man who was both distant and magnetic, kind and guarded. Ethan brought him coffee, left him blankets, but never shared more than cryptic comments about his own life. Jamie began to notice details, the way Ethan's hands lingered on the desk, the faint scar above his eyebrow, the way he seemed to carry a weight no one else could see. One night, as Jamie finished a chapter about a man searching for redemption, Ethan spoke. "That's me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Or it could be." Jamie looked up, startled. "What do you mean?" Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he handed Jamie a key. "This opens the library on the 5th floor. You'll find what you need there. Keep writing. And don't stop." Jamie's fingers closed around the key, his heart pounding. He didn't know what he was walking into, but he knew one thing: this office, this man, this moment, they were changing him. And maybe, just maybe, he was changing Ethan too. The library on the 5th floor was a labyrinth of books and shadows, its shelves stretching to the ceiling, filled with volumes that smelled of dust and secrets. Jamie's footsteps echoed as he wandered the aisles, the key Ethan had given him heavy in his pocket. He didn't know what he was supposed to find, but the weight of Ethan's words, "You'll find what you need there," pushed him forward. He spent hours combing through the shelves, pulling out books at random. Most were business texts, dry and impersonal, but tucked between them were journals, their leather covers worn and embossed with initials, E.C. Ethan Caldwell. Jamie's pulse quickened. He shouldn't open them. He knew that. But curiosity, and something deeper, something about Ethan's guarded eyes, made him crack the spine of one. The pages were filled with Ethan's handwriting, sharp and precise, but the words were raw, unguarded. Entries from years ago described a younger Ethan, a man who loved fiercely but lost everything. One passage stopped Jamie cold. "I loved him, but I couldn't save him. I built this empire to forget, but it's all a cage." The hymn wasn't named, but the pain in those words felt like a wound Jamie recognized. He closed the journal, his hands trembling. Ethan wasn't just a Siohe, was a man haunted. Back in the office, Jamie wrote with a new intensity. His story shifted, weaving in a character inspired by Ethan, a man who hid his heart behind power, who longed for connection but feared it. The words poured out, each one a step closer to the truth Jamie had always buried. He wrote about his own past. About Sam, the boy he'd loved at 17, who'd kissed him under a willow tree and then vanished when their town turned on them. He wrote about the ache of hiding, of pretending to be someone he wasn't. When Ethan returned that evening, he read Jamie's pages without a word. For the first time, Jamie saw a crack in his armor, a flicker of something like recognition in his eyes. "You're getting closer," Ethan said, his voice tight. "But you're still not there." "To what?" Jamie asked, frustration creeping in. "What do you want from me?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "The truth. All of it." Jamie stood, his notebook falling to the floor. "Why does it matter so much to you? Why am I even here?" Ethan looked away, his gaze fixed on the city beyond the windows. "Because someone needs to tell the stories no one else will. And because," he paused, his voice dropping, "because I can't." The air between them crackled, heavy with unspoken words. Jamie wanted to push, to demand answers, but something in Ethan's expression stopped him. Instead, he picked up his notebook and wrote again. This time about two men, one young and searching, one older and broken, finding each other in the ruins of their pasts. The story felt alive, dangerous, like it could unravel them both. Days turned into weeks, and the office became Jamie's world. Ethan was there less often, but when he was, their conversations grew longer, deeper. Jamie learned fragments of Ethan's life. He'd grown up in a wealthy family, but his father's disapproval of his choices had left scars. Ethan never said the word gay, but Jamie felt it in the spaces between his words, in the way Ethan's eyes lingered on him sometimes, soft and searching. One night, as Jamie wrote about a kiss that changed everything, Ethan spoke from across the room. "Do you believe in second chances, Jamie?" Jamie's pen stilled. "I want to, but I've been burned before." Ethan nodded, his face half in shadow. "So have I. But sometimes, the right story can change everything." The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Jamie's heart raced, not just from the story he was writing, but from the man watching him write it. He didn't know if Ethan felt the same pull, but he knew one thing. He wasn't just writing for himself anymore. He was writing for them. The library became Jamie's refuge, a place where he pieced together more of Ethan's past. Another journal revealed a name, Daniel, man Ethan had loved and lost. Daniel had been an artist, vibrant and reckless, but addiction had taken him, leaving Ethan to build Horizon Enterprises as a monument to his grief. Jamie's stories began to mirror this loss, weaving in themes of redemption and forgiveness. But he still held back the deepest parts of himself, afraid of what it would mean to let Ethan see it all. One evening, as thunder rumbled outside, Ethan handed Jamie a glass of whiskey. "Write about what scares you," he said, his voice low. "That's where the real story is." Jamie took a sip, the burn steadying him. "What scares you, Ethan?" For the first time, Ethan didn't look away. Losing someone again. And letting someone in. The honesty hit Jamie like a wave. He set the glass down and wrote, his words raw and unfiltered, about love that defied fear, about two men who found each other in the dark. When he finished, he handed the pages to Ethan, his heart in his throat. Ethan read in silence, his fingers tightening on the paper. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. "This," he said, his voice breaking. "This is what I've been waiting for." The office felt different after that night, as if Ethan's words had cracked open a door neither of them could close. Jamie wrote with a ferocity he hadn't known he possessed. His stories no longer just fiction, but a bridge between him and Ethan. Each page was a confession, a question, a hope. Ethan began sharing more. small pieces of himself that felt like treasures. He told Jamie about his childhood in Connecticut, about a father who saw love as weakness, about the years he spent building Horizon to prove him wrong. But every story circled back to Daniel, the man who'd been Ethan's world until he wasn't. "I couldn't save him," Ethan said one night, staring at the rain. "I thought if I was strong enough, rich enough, I could. But I wasn't." Jamie's heart ached for him. "It wasn't your fault." Ethan's smile was bitter. "You don't know that." But Jamie did. He knew the weight of guilt, the way it clung like damp clothes. He'd carried it since the night his family found out and turned their backs. He wrote about it now, letting the pain bleed onto the Pangea story of a boy who loved and lost, who found solace in words but never in himself. Ethan read every word, his silence louder than any praise. Their nights grew longer, filled with quiet conversations and shared silences. Jamie noticed the way Ethan's hand brushed his when passing a coffee mug, the way his voice softened when he said Jamie's name. It was dangerous, this pull between them, but Jamie couldn't stop it. He didn't want to. One afternoon, Jamie found a photo tucked in one of Ethan's journals, younger Ethan, laughing, his arm around a man with wild curls and a paint-splattered shirt. Daniel. The sight twisted something in Jamie's chest. Not jealousy, but fear. Could he ever mean as much to Ethan as Daniel had? He wrote about it that night. A story of a man afraid to love again, afraid he'd never measure up to a ghost. When Ethan read it, he didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said, "You see too much, Jamie." "Is that a bad thing?" Jamie asked, his voice barely steady. Ethan's eyes met his, raw and unguarded. "It's terrifying." The tension between them built, a storm as fierce as the one that had brought Jamie here. He wrote about it, about longing that felt like drowning, about two men standing on the edge of something they couldn't name. Ethan's feedback grew sharper, more personal, as if he was reading his own heart in Jamie's words. One night, as Jamie finished a chapter about a kiss that broke down walls, Ethan stood abruptly. "Come with me," he said, grabbing his coat. Jamie followed, heart pounding, as they stepped into the rain-soaked city. Ethan led him to a small park, its benches empty under the streetlights. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and Ethan stopped, turning to face him. "Why do you let me stay?" Jamie asked, the question burning in his chest. "Why me?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Because you remind me what it's like to feel something. Because your words, they make me want to try again." Jamie's breath caught. He stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking. "Try what?" Ethan didn't answer with words. He reached out, his hand brushing Jamie's cheek. And for a moment, the world was just them two men, rain-soaked and raw, standing on the edge of something bigger than either of them. Then Ethan pulled back, his face closing off. "I'm sorry," he muttered, turning away. Jamie grabbed his arm. Don't run from this." Ethan froze, his eyes searching Jamie's. "I don't know how to do this again," he admitted, his voice rough. "Not after him." Jamie's heart pounded, but he didn't let go. "Then let me show you." The moment stretched, fragile and electric. Then Ethan leaned in, his lips brushing Jamie's in a kiss that felt like a beginning and an ending all at once. It was soft, tentative, but it carried the weight of everything they'd both lost. When they pulled apart, Ethan's eyes were bright with something Jamie hadn't seen before, hope. They returned to the office, silent but together, and Jamie wrote. He wrote about that kiss, about two broken souls finding each other in the rain. Ethan read it, his hand resting on Jamie's shoulder. And for the first time, he smiled a real, unguarded smile. But the next morning, Ethan was distant again, his walls back up. "Keep writing," he said, his voice clipped. "We're not done." Jamie's stomach twisted. He wanted to believe in the kiss, in the possibility of them. But Ethan's coldness stung. He threw himself into his writing, pouring his confusion, his longing, his fear into the pages. The story grew darker, more complex, mirroring the tangled dance between them. In the library, Jamie found another journal, this one recent. Ethan's words were raw, unguarded. "He's waking something in me I thought was dead. But I'm not ready. Not yet." Jamie's heart raced. Ethan was fighting this as much as he was. But why? The office became a battleground of words and silences. Jamie wrote with a desperation he couldn't name, each story a plea for Ethan to let him in. But Ethan was a fortress, his moments of warmth followed by days of distance. Jamie felt like he was chasing a shadow, one that slipped through his fingers every time he got close. He began to notice cracks in Ethan's world. Employees whispered about Horizon Enterprises' struggles, lawsuits, financial strain, a board that wanted Ethan out. Jamie overheard a tense phone call one night, Ethan's voice sharp as he argued with someone about keeping it together. Horizon wasn't the empire it seemed, and Ethan was fighting to hold it up alone. Jamie's stories reflected this, weaving in a character who carried the weight of a crumbling kingdom, who loved but couldn't let go of his past. He wrote about their kiss, about the fear that followed, about two men who wanted each other but were too broken to trust. Ethan read every page, his comments sparse but piercing. "You're close," he'd say, or dig deeper. But he never explained what he meant. One night, Jamie couldn't take it anymore. He slammed his notebook shut, glaring at Ethan across the desk. "Why do you keep pushing me? What do you want from my stories?" Ethan's eyes flickered with something like pain. "I want you to tell the truth. Not just yours, mine too." "Then tell me," Jamie shouted. "Stop hiding behind my words." Ethan stood, his hands clenched. "You think I'm hiding? You have no idea what it's like to lose everything and still have to stand here, pretending I'm fine." Jamie's anger softened. "Then let me in, Ethan. Let me help." For a moment, Ethan looked like he might. But then he turned away, his voice cold. "Just right, Jamie. That's what I need from you." The rejection stung, but Jamie didn't stop. He wrote about a man who loved in secret, who built walls to protect a heart that had been shattered. He wrote about himself, about the boy who'd been cast out for loving another boy, about the man who wanted to believe in love again. Each word was a risk, a step toward Ethan, even if Ethan wouldn't meet him halfway. The library offered more clues. Jamie found letters tucked in a journal, addressed to Daniel but never sent. "I should have fought harder for you," one read. "I should have fought for us." Jamie's heart ached. Ethan wasn't just grieving, was punishing himself. And Jamie, with his stories, was stirring something Ethan wasn't ready to face. One evening, as Jamie wrote about a man who chose love over fear, Ethan interrupted. "You're writing about me again," he said, his voice low. Jamie met his gaze. "I'm writing about us." Ethan's breath hitched. He stepped closer, his hand hovering near Jamie's. "You don't know what you're asking for." "Then show me," Jamie said, his voice steady. "Let me see you." Ethan's hand dropped, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he sat beside Jamie, closer than ever, and began to talk. He spoke of Daniel, of their love, of the night Daniel overdosed, and Ethan found him too late. He spoke of the empire he built to escape, of the loneliness that followed. And he spoke of Jamie how his words, his presence, had cracked the walls Ethan had spent years building. "I'm scared," Ethan admitted, his voice raw. "Scared of what you make me feel." Jamie reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining. "I'm scared too. But I'm here." That night, they didn't kiss. They didn't need to. The truth between them was enough. Fragile but real. Jamie wrote into the early hours, his story now a mirror of their shared vulnerability of a man who loved again. A boy who found home in another's heart. But the next day, Ethan was gone. A note on the desk read, "I need time. Keep writing." Jamie's heart sank. But he didn't stop. He wrote about loss, about hope, about the courage it took to love someone who might not be ready. The office felt emptier without Ethan. But Jamie felt him in every word, every page. In the library, he found one last journal, its pages fresh. Ethan's handwriting was shaky. "Jamie sees me. I don't know if I can let him." The words were a knife, but they were also a promise. Ethan was fighting, not just for himself, but for them. Jamie wrote on, his story's a lifeline, a way to reach Ethan even when he was miles away. He didn't know if Ethan would come back, but he knew one thing, he wasn't giving up. Ethan's absence stretched into days, then a week. The office, once a haven, felt like a cage without him. Jamie wrote through the loneliness, his stories growing darker, more urgent. He wrote about a man who ran from love, about a boy who waited, hoping against hope. Each word was a prayer, a plea for Ethan to return. The city outside was relentless, its noise a reminder of how small Jamie felt without Ethan's presence. He wandered the library, searching for more of Ethan's journals, but found only echoes of the man he'd come to care for. One entry, dated just before Ethan left. "Read, I want to stay, but I don't know how to be enough for him." Jamie's heart twisted. Ethan wasn't running from him, was running from himself. Jamie's writing became his anchor. He poured his fear, his longing, his love into the pages, crafting a story of two men who found each other in the wreckage of their pasts. He wrote about their kiss, about the way Ethan's hand had trembled against his cheek, about the hope that lingered even now. The words were raw, unfiltered, and for the first time, Jamie didn't hold back. He wrote the truth. He was falling for Ethan, and it terrified him. One night, as Jamie finished a chapter about a man who returned to face his fears, the office door opened. Ethan stood there, his coat damp, his eyes tired but bright. "You're still here," he said, his voice soft. Jamie stood, his heart racing. "You told me to keep writing." Ethan crossed the room, stopping just short of Jamie. "I read your pages. The ones you left on the desk." Jamie's throat tightened. Those pages were his heart laid bare. Every fear, every hope, every piece of himself he'd been too scared to show the world. And Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. "They're beautiful. And they're us." The air between them was electric, fragile. Jamie stepped closer, his voice steady. "Why did you leave?" Ethan looked away, his jaw tight. "I was scared. Of this. Of you. Of what it means to feel this again." Jamie reached for his hand, their fingers brushing. "You don't have to be scared alone." Ethan's eyes met his, raw and searching. "I don't know if I can do this, Jamie, but I want to try." They stood there, the city humming beyond the windows, the weight of their pasts heavy but not crushing. Jamie pulled Ethan into a hug, their arms tight around each other. And for the first time, Ethan didn't pull away. It wasn't a kiss, but it was a promise to try, to fight, to be. The next day, Ethan stayed. They worked side by side. Jamie writing, Ethan reading. Their silence is comfortable now. Ethan began to share more. Not just about Daniel, but about the man he wanted to be. He spoke of dismantling Horizon, of starting over, of building something that mattered. Jamie listened, his stories shifting to reflect this new Ethan, a man who was learning to let go. But the world outside wasn't kind. News broke of Horizon's financial troubles, and Ethan's phone buzzed with demands from the board. Jamie saw the strain in his eyes, the way his shoulders tensed. He wrote about it, crafting a story of a man who fought for his future, who chose love over power. Ethan read it and smiled. A small, real smile. "You make me sound braver than I am," he said. "You are brave," Jamie replied. "You just don't see it yet." Their nights grew softer, filled with shared stories and quiet touches. Jamie wrote about love that endured, about two men who rebuilt each other. Ethan began to write too, small notes in the margins of Jamie's pages, confessions of his own fears and hopes. One read, "You make me want to be better." Jamie kept that page close, a reminder of what they were building. But the board's pressure grew. One evening, Ethan came back from a meeting, his face pale. "They're trying to push me out," he said. "They think I'm weak." Jamie stood, his voice fierce. "You're not weak. You're human. And you're not alone." Ethan looked at him, his eyes soft. "I know. Because of you." That night, Jamie wrote a chapter about a man who stood his ground, who fought for what he loved. Ethan read it, his hand resting on Jamie's. And for the first time, Jamie felt like they were in this together, not just as writer and reader, but as something more. The office became their sanctuary, a place where Jamie's words and Ethan's silences wove a fragile but growing bond. Jamie wrote with a clarity he'd never had, his stories no longer just his own, but a shared tapestry of their lives. Ethan was there every day now, his presence steady, his walls crumbling bit by bit. But the outside world pressed in. The board's demands grew louder, and Ethan spent hours on calls, fighting to save Horizon. Jamie saw the toll it took, the sleepless nights, the way Ethan's hands shook when he thought no one was watching. He wrote about it, crafting a story of a man who carried too much, who needed someone to share the load. Ethan read it and didn't speak, but his hand lingered on Jamie's shoulder. A silent thank you. One night, Ethan brought Jamie to the roof of the building, the city sprawling below them. The air was crisp, the stars faint against the city's glow. "I used to come here to think," Ethan said, his voice low. "After Daniel. After everything." Jamie stood beside him, their arms brushing. "What do you think about now?" Ethan turned to him, his eyes soft. "You. Us. What comes next?" Jamie's heart raced. He wanted to ask what us meant, but he was afraid of the answer. Instead, he wrote about it that night, a story of two men standing on a rooftop, daring to dream of a future. Ethan read it and pulled Jamie close, their foreheads touching. "I'm trying," he whispered. "For you." The next day, Ethan faced the board. Jamie waited in the office, his pen still, his heart pounding. When Ethan returned, his face was grim but resolute. "They're giving me 1 month," he said. 1 month to turn things around, or I'm out." Jamie stood, his voice fierce. "Then we'll fight. Together." Ethan's smile was small but real. "You sound like one of your stories." "Maybe I am," Jamie said. "But this one's ours." They worked together now, Jamie writing while Ethan planned. Jamie's stories became bolder, weaving in themes of resilience, of love that defied odds. Ethan began to share his own ideas, small suggestions that shaped the narrative. One night, he handed Jamie a page of his own letter to Daniel, saying goodbye. "I loved you," it read, "but I'm ready to live again." Jamie's eyes burned as he read it. "You're letting go," he said. Ethan nodded. "Because of you." Their nights grew intimate, not just in words, but in to chase a hand on a wrist, a brush of lips, a quiet moment where the world fell away. Jamie wrote about it, about love that grew slowly, carefully, but stronger than anything he'd known. Ethan read every word, his comments softer now, more open. But the board wasn't the only threat. Jamie's past crept in an email from his sister, the first contact in years. "Dad's sick," it read. "He wants to see you." Jamie's stomach churned. He hadn't spoken to his family since they'd thrown him out, since they'd called his love for Sam a sin. He didn't know if he could face them, but Ethan's hand on his shoulder steadied him. "You don't have to go," Ethan said. "But if you do, I'm here." Jamie wrote about it, a story of a boy facing his past, of a man who stood beside him. The words were painful but cathartic, a way to process the fear. Ethan read it and pulled Jamie into a kiss, fierce and grounding. "You're stronger than you know," he said. The month ticked by, each day a battle. Ethan worked tirelessly, and Jamie wrote, his stories a mirror of their fight for Horizon, for themselves, for each other. One night, as they sat together, Ethan spoke. "If I lose Horizon, I don't care. Not if I have you." Jamie's heart stopped. He kissed Ethan, slow and deep, and for the first time, he felt like they were building something unbreakable. He wrote about it that night, a story of love that survived the storm, of two men who found home in each other. The deadline loomed, a shadow over their fragile happiness. Ethan was a whirlwind of meetings and strategies, fighting to save Horizon while Jamie wrote, his story's a lifeline for them both. He wrote about a man who faced his fears, who chose love over pride, who rebuilt his world with someone by his side. Ethan read every page, his eyes bright with pride and something deeper. Jamie's sister called again, her voice hesitant. "Dad's worse," she said. "He's asking for you." Jamie's heart clenched. He hadn't seen his family in 8 years, hadn't heard his father's voice since the night he was disowned. But Ethan's hand in his gave him courage. "Go," Ethan said. "You need this. And I'll be waiting." Jamie flew to Ohio, his notebook his only comfort. His father was frail, a shadow of the man who'd once towered over him. "I was wrong," his father whispered, tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry." The words broke something in Jamie, but they also healed. He wrote about it on the plane back, a story of forgiveness, of a boy who found his way home. When he returned, Ethan was waiting, his arms open. "How was it?" he asked. "Hard," Jamie said, "but worth it." Ethan kissed him, soft and sure. "I'm proud of you." The final days before the board's decision were a blur. Ethan presented his plan to save Horizon, a bold restructuring that put people over profit. Jamie wrote alongside him, his stories a parallel narrative of hope and resilience. They worked late, their hands brushing, their laughter soft in the quiet office. The night before the board meeting, Ethan took Jamie to the rooftop again. The city sparkled below, and Ethan's eyes were bright. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said, "I have you. That's enough." Jamie's heart swelled. It's more than enough. They kissed under the stars, their love a quiet rebellion against the world's chaos. Jamie wrote about it that night, a story of two men who found strength in each other, who dared to love despite everything. Ethan read it and held him close, their breaths mingling in the dark. The board meeting came, and Jamie waited, his pen still, his heart pounding. When Ethan returned, his face was unreadable. "They're giving me a chance," he said finally. "Horizon's mine for now?" Jamie laughed, pulling him into a hug. "We did it." Ethan shook his head. "You did it. Your stories, they gave me the courage to fight." That night, Jamie wrote a chapter about victory, about love that endured, about two men who rebuilt their world together. Ethan read it, his hand on Jamie's, and for the first time, Jamie felt like he belonged not just in the office, but in Ethan's life. The office was no longer just a shelter, it was home. Jamie and Ethan built a life there, their days filled with words and love, their nights with quiet promises. Horizon stabilized, Ethan's vision taking root, and Jamie's stories found a publisher, his voice finally heard. But the real story was them. Jamie wrote their love into every page, a testament to two men who found each other in the rain, who fought their fears and won. Ethan read every word, his comments now full of love, not critique. "You've changed me," he said one night, his voice soft. "You've changed everything." Jamie smiled, his hand in Ethan's. "We changed each other." They moved out of the office, into a small apartment with a view of the city. Jamie's notebook was always close, but now he wrote for joy, not survival. Ethan left Horizon's daily operations to a trusted team, focusing on a new Venturia foundation to help young artists. Inspired by Daniel, by Jamie, by their love. One evening, as they sat on their balcony, Ethan handed Jamie a ring. "I want forever," he said, his voice steady. "With you." Jamie's eyes burned, his heart full. "Forever," he agreed, slipping the ring on. He wrote their final chapter that night, a story of love that survived loss, fear, and time. It wasn't perfect, but it was there's a story of two men who got lost and found each other, who kept writing until they found home. The rain fell softly outside, a reminder of the night it all began. Jamie closed his notebook, his hand in Ethan's, and knew they'd never be lost again.